Dr. Markowski. Welcome to Kinesiology 4370. Today we are covering chapters 1, chapters 2, and chapter 18. Quick little reminders. Some of your modules have outlines in them to help you take notes. Not for today. Today's pretty straightforward. We have Quizlets. It says needs to update, but everything should be updated. And there are 15 class activities. It says in class, think about more like related to lecture, like think about your lecture as a class. There's 15 different topics, so there's 15 class activities, and we drop the two lowest. I use these 4 symbols in my lectures. This first one, the stars, that is something that is important, so draw attention to it. I have a stack of books. The books indicates that it's directly from your textbook. Sometimes I'll go through those slides kind of fast and just kind of mention it from your book. There's this party hat, and the party hat is this is something that's interesting, but it's not going to be in your exam. So I want to talk about it because it's interesting, but don't worry about it for the exam. And then this alarm here, and that's usually something that's either super important or it's material that wasn't covered in your readings, like for example, a research article that I want to talk about. Chapter 1. If we were meeting in person, I would ask you to get into small groups, but instead just think about this with yourself. How do we define physical activity and how do we define exercise? What's the difference between these two? And also think about what are the different types of physical activity and what are the different types of exercise. So physical activity is a behavior. It's any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscle contractions with an increase in energy expenditure. We have 4 typical physical activity environments: recreation, also known as leisure, occupation, household, and transportation. For exercise, this is a type of physical activity that is planned. It's structured, it's repetitive, and it's purposeful. And it's used to improve or maintain physical fitness. And so our physical activity, we had recreation and leisure. So our exercise here might fit into that. For energy expenditure, we have aerobic exercise. This is physical activity that is oxygen dependent. We have anaerobic, which is physical activity that is oxygen independent. So a lot of times you'll hear people talk about that are doing their aerobic exercise, but are we ever exclusively aerobic? No, right? You're sitting here, you're watching my lecture. You're a little bit anaerobic, you're a little bit aerobic right now. So I tend to get really particular about this, and I want students to think about this as well. Since both occur within physical activity, always, it's just that the contribution varies based on the exercise intensity, right? So for high intensity exercise, very little energy contribution from aerobic, mostly from anaerobic, if it's like short, intense exercise, right? So in this class, we're not going to use the terms aerobic exercise as much. We're going to use the term cardiorespiratory exercise, right? It's a type of energy expenditure that's using our cardiorespiratory system for aerobic dominant exercises. So running, that's CRE. Biking, that's CRE. Weightlifting, not CRE. It's not aerobic dominant. So physical fitness. This is the outcome of physical activity and exercise. We might think of these as 2 separate things, but when we're talking about somebody's physical fitness, we're talking about everything together. And it's an attained set of attributes that relates to the ability to perform physical activity. We have our health-related physical fitness, right? There's 5 of these. You think of what those might be, and remember them from your reading. We have 5 components of health-related physical fitness. So we have our cardiorespiratory fitness, skeletal muscle strength, flexibility, body composition, and skeletal muscle endurance. So these are health related. They're not necessarily related to performance. I mean, depending on your sport, yes, skeletal muscle strength may be important. But as far as doing our day-to-day tasks, these are what's super important. We also have skill-related fitness, and this is different. We have 6 things for skill-related fitness. So think about things that are important in addition to those 5 health things. Things that are important for sports. What might some of these be? All right, so we have agility, balance, power, speed, coordination, and reaction time. So if somebody's just doing exercise because they want to maintain their physical fitness, we're not as concerned about their power and speed with that, right? They are going to gain some power and speed with their training, but this is more skill related. We're going to stick more with their health related physical fitness. Right. Really brief history of exercise physiology. One slide. That's it. Physical activity as a means to improve health dates to 2500 BCE with ancient Chinese writings and Hippocrates. I thought that was really interesting that we have evidence from this long ago that exercise is used to improve health. And scientific investigations related to physical activity and health led to the development of exercise physiology as an academic discipline in the early to mid 20th century. As far as physical activity epidemiology goes, the interest in physical activity and health led to systematic study of these variables. And so the development of physical activity epidemiology as a field. And early studies focusing on occupational physical activity and health outcomes established an inverse relationship between physical activity and cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality. So people who had more physically demanding jobs tended to have lower cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality. So that was kind of our early research with this. And researchers established a relationship between fitness and all-cause cardiovascular disease mortality. So there's this figure in your textbook, figure 1.3. And with this, we have physical activity and physical fitness. So they're kind of related, right? Somebody who does more physical activity tends to have better physical fitness. And what they found was that with either one of these, as the person increased their physical activity or physical fitness, that along the bottom, their risk of cardiovascular disease or chronic heart disease decreased. And eventually we got to our ACSM, American Heart and American Heart Association guidelines, which is CRE, aerobic type exercise people tend to think of. Exercise recommendations. Moderate intensity, 30 plus minutes a week. I need to start over again. Moderate intensity, 30 plus minutes a day, 5 days a week, or vigorous intensity, 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, or some combination thereof. Okay, so somebody does vigorous intensity 1 day a week and then moderate intensity 4 days a week, that would meet the recommendations. And the guidelines do allow for multiple bouts of at least 10 minutes and mixing of moderate and vigorous to accumulate these recommended levels. For resistance exercise recommendations, specific details related to frequency, repetitions, and number of exercises are also provided. The general overall guideline is that 2 days per week of some sort of resistance exercise. We'll go to the specific details with the goals and stuff later in the semester. Chapter 2. In Chapter 2, we're going to talk about pre-participation screening in exercise settings, and is usually self-guided. And this helps ensure that physical activity risks do not outweigh the benefits of physical activity and exercise. There's a decision tree to help with this, figure 2.4 in your textbook. And we're looking at cardiovascular disease risk factors. There's positive and negative risk factors. And positive meaning it's associated with cardiovascular disease risk, negative meaning it's not. So negative is not the absence of positive. It's not for each thing positive, negative, like a COVID test did a positive and negative. It's rather that positive is associated with increased risk for cardiovascular disease, and negative is not associated, protects against cardiovascular disease. So pre-participation screening. Students struggle with this. We're going to spend significant time with it because it's important. It's useful for exercise physiologists and exercise professionals. If you're PT or OT, it's useful to know this kind of stuff. And of course, medical professionals, you will use this as well. Why do we want to do a pre-participation screening? I already kind of mentioned this, right? Helps ensure the risks of an increased physical activity do not outweigh the benefits of this healthy behavior. And we want to identify those with contraindications of physical activity. A formal evaluation and clearance is needed before they do exercise. If they need to do a medically supervised physical activity program, or if there's other significant health or medical concerns we'd want to know.
we want to know that they had a knee replacement. That might affect how we do our exercise prescription, right? Are these an absolute rule? If we were in person, you could see me shaking my head. No, they're not an absolute rule. These are guidelines, which means they're recommendations. They're not standard of care. And each exercise physiologist should devise a screening scheme that works for them to best meet the needs and their clients and the environment they work in. So again, guidelines, not standard of care. So we still need to act reasonable and safe, but it provides a little room for judgment. There's two types of pre-participation screenings. The first one is self-guided, and the second one is professionally supervised. So for us, we're usually doing self-guided ones. Okay, so this is the Part Q, which you're going to do in lab class. It's our PARMED X Plus physician clearance follow-up questionnaire, which is just a one-year extension of the Part Q Plus. You might want to use the people who are a little bit older or who are more likely to have significant health concerns. And both these are updated annually. It's a free resource online. You can just Google these words and it pops up the one for that year. For the professionally supervised one, that's not what we do. Professional means like a medical professional, so physician, nurse practitioner, so forth. So for lower levels of participant risk, the exercise physiologist could do these if it's a healthy person and we're just taking some additional information, some blood pressure, maybe some cholesterol, something like that. We can do that. But if it's higher risk participants, then definitely need more advanced medical professionals for those. The person completes a health history questionnaire, which is a comprehensive evaluation of health and medical history. So again, if our population is healthy, exercise physiologists can view that and say, yep, nothing here is alarming. And then we do need to identify if anybody that does need a medical exam or a clearance if they're higher risk. We want them to do that before they started exercise. Areas to consider in our screening. What is their physical activity history? We just talked about in chapter 1, people who are physically active have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. So are they physically active? Do they have any known cardiovascular, metabolic, or renal disease, abbreviated as CMR? Do they have any major signs and symptoms suggestive of cardiovascular disease? And we're going to use this information to decide what happens next. All right, so in the physical activity history, we do this because compared to a sedentary lifestyle, somebody who's physically active has a lower risk. And we generally consider if they're physically active over the previous 3 months. So if somebody has lower risk, they're exercising at least 3 days per week for at least 30 minutes and a moderate intensity. So you'll notice this is less than those ACSM AHA recommendations that we just did, where it was 5 days a week of 30 minutes. And that's because that's where we know we get the most benefit. We start seeing benefit, specifically with a reduction in cardiovascular disease with only 3 days, but there's significant more benefits with people who are exercising at least 5 days a week. We do consider people physically active if they do 3 days, but they're not meeting recommendations if they're only doing 3 days, not doing 5 days. Right, so there's a difference between being active and meeting the recommendations. And this is from your suggested additional textbook, and you don't have to actually do that. I just really like that slide, so let's figure. So what this has is somebody who is physically active. They're the solid line here, and somebody who is sedentary. So at baseline, somebody who is physically active is going to be about half the risk of having a cardiovascular event at any moment in time. So it's not saying that the risk is half, so they're not going to have one. It's just at any given moment in time, comparing the physically active and the physically inactive person. At that moment, the physically inactive person has half the risk than the active person. Now, when they start exercising, how many days a week are they exercising? If they are exercising 0 days a week and they decide to go do a bout of exercise, their risk for a cardiovascular event increases 100-fold over somebody who is, compared to somebody who's not, somebody who is physically active. If they are exercising 1 to 2 days a week, that risk starts going down. 3 to 4, even more, and then 5 days a week, they have a significant risk reduction here. So that's what that's saying. It's just saying that the more days per week you exercise, the lower your relative risk of an acute myocardial infarction, AMI, with each bout of exercise that you're doing. Okay, so somebody who's doing 0 days per week has the highest risk. Somebody who's doing 5 to plus days per week has the lowest risk. There's still a risk, right? During physical activity, that's always a factor, but it's the lowest. And this came from, again, this is not from a textbook. This just came from a long history of studies where they went back and they looked at people who were physically active. Were they having acute myocardial infarctions, or heart attacks during exercise? And very rarely. So that's what we kind of changed the guidelines. The guidelines used to be a little bit different as far as who need a medical screening. So based on this, if you're physically active, you generally don't need a medical screening before doing exercise because you're already doing exercise and successfully. All right, let's get back to our textbook. So known cardiovascular, metabolic, or renal disease. The ones most relevant to screening include anything with the heart, right? We want to know if there's anything with the heart. We want to know if they have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. That also ties in with the heart. Or if they have renal disease, especially renal failure. So those are our major ones. We also want to know if they have ankle swelling not due to injury. It can be an issue of indicative of a cardiovascular issue. Heart palpitations, fast heart rate, intermittent claudication. That's intermittent leg pain. I have it on my survey. People usually ask what that is. I'm like, well, if you had it, you'd know. All right, okay. And heart murmurs, unusual fatigue or shortness of breath during light exertion or normal activity. So not their max exercise and they get out of breath, but they do grocery shopping or go up a flight of stairs in their home. Ethics and professional behaviors. So ethics is a branch of philosophy. It's an abstract concept focusing on morals and values that inform decisions and behaviors. So your morals are not the same as ethics, right? It's what informs our ethics. So our values help inform our morals, which inform our ethics. So people with the same values could have different ethics. Direct quote from the book: as certified professionals, it is critical to understand the expectations articulated in our code of ethics. So quick history with our exercise physiology, a little party hat, so we're not going to be tested on this. ACSM was founded in 1954, our 60th anniversary this year, to provide a professional society for individuals sharing a common interest in health and fitness. In 1975 was the first version of ACSM guidelines for graded exercise testing and exercise prescription. That's what your textbook expands on. And in 1982 was the first certification that eventually became the exercise physiology certification. It was called Health Fitness Instructor. When I was an undergrad, that was what we took. And then in 2008, it was renamed to Health Fitness Specialist. And then in 2015, they renamed it to Certified Exercise Physiologist. And this is where it is right now. ACSM is working on getting appointments with exercise physiologists reimbursable for Medicare and Medicaid, because once that happens, other insurances will follow. Kind of recognizing exercise physiology as another profession that is important to people's health, right? So a physician can say we need to exercise, but they're not going to take the time, they don't have the time to go over the details of that, but they could do a referral to an exercise physiologist. And like I said, ACSM is working on getting that insurance reimbursable to hopefully increase the number of those appointments that are made. There's a code for it. It just doesn't happen very often. Okay, so current certifications, ACSM has several. The one this class focuses on is that EPC one, that Certified Exercise Physiologist, and requires a degree in a bachelor's degree in kinesiology related field. Like I mentioned on the first day, we're working on getting our program accredited, and but you won't have graduated from it while it was accredited. So you have until 2027, I believe, to take the exam. if you are interested in doing so. You also need CPR as well. And coursework, you get all this coursework with your current degree. So our ACSM Code of Ethics, the principal purpose of the college is the generation and dissemination of knowledge concerning all aspects of persons engaged, exercise with full respect for dignity of people. Mhm. So we're going to disseminate our knowledge, we're going to treat people with respect. Where's the line? And these are all little books because they're kind of little boring things, but I'm talking about ACSM's ethics. I need to mention exactly what they are, right? So members should strive continuously to improve knowledge and skill and make available to their colleagues and to the public the benefits of their professional expertise. We should maintain high professional and scientific standards and should not voluntarily collaborate professionally with anyone who violates this principle. So I'm not going to collaborate with somebody who says that older adults should be doing only vigorous intensity exercise of 90% VO2 max and above, right? Because there's not scientific evidence for that. The college and its members should safeguard the public and itself against members who are deficient in ethical conduct. So we should speak out against things that aren't right. And the ideals of the college imply that the responsibilities of each fellow or member extend not only to the individual, but also to society with the purpose of improving both the health and well-being of the individual and the community. All right, so I just think about this as like, we want everybody to exercise, pretty much everybody at least. With that in mind, we have a scope of practice. And it's a guide to what lies outside the boundaries, not so much about what's inside our scope of practice, but what is not our scope of practice. We have significant overlap with other healthcare professionals. And so it's important that we know the boundaries because functioning outside the scope of practice boundaries is unethical and in some cases illegal. So your textbook has this little figure here. And we overlap a little bit with we overlap a lot with a certified personal trainer and a little bit with clinical psychologists. And we're not diagnosing people's mental health. What that means is that we use behavior modifications. The exercise is a behavior. So somebody going from not exercising to exercising requires behavior modification, which is where the psychology come in. Physical therapists, again, we're not treating things, but we do need to know muscle movements and what is needed. If somebody says, hey, I need to strengthen my quads, then we should need to know that. Clinical exercise physiologist and registered dietitian. So in our scope of practice decision tree, a requested act, is it permitted? Yes, you personally have the education needed. Can you demonstrate the knowledge, skill, and competence? Do you accept responsibility and accountability for the actions? Then yes, it's good to proceed. If you're not sure if the service is permitted, if you don't think you have the expertise for it, then that's not good. So for example, a lot of exercise physiologists work in hospitals and they do the exercise stress test. And so you have to read ECGs during exercise testing. So that's definitely within our scope of practice. Now, for me personally, I am horrible at reading ECG strips. It's just not a skill that I do very well. And so yes, exercise physiologists do that, but do I personally have the education? Okay, I have the education. Do I personally have the skills? Not really, no. So no, I'm not going to apply for those type of jobs and do that type of activity, right? So it can vary from person to person what is within their scope of practice. One of the biggest ones that is hard for us to delineate, we mean exercise physiology, exercise science, is nutrition information. So for example, the practice of dietetics is limited to licenses. So if somebody says, hey, I have kidney disease, what should I eat? That's not us, right? We might know that. We may have taken a class and like that and whatnot, but we're not licensed to give that type of information out. However, if somebody says, hey, I need to get more protein in my diet, what are some good sources of protein? That we could say, okay, well, things that are generally high in protein are meats tend to be high in protein. There's also, nuts tend to be a higher protein option. There's all sorts of shakes, and we can give that general information. We're not telling the person you need to eat this. We're just giving broad, generalized information. So conflict of interest, ACSM Ethics and Professional Conduct Committee has defined conflict of interest as a significant financial interest in a business or other direct or indirect personal gain or consideration provided by a business that may compromise or have the appearance of compromising an ACSM member's professional judgment. So back to that protein example I just said, because this is pretty common. I used to do protein research, and so I would a lot of times have people ask me like, "Oh, what's the best type of protein shake?" or "What's the best source of protein?" or "I don't like shakes. What are some other sources of protein?" That was a really common question I would get asked. So if let's say I had a lot of stock in Stonyfield Dairy. And so I said, "Oh, the best you got to do is you have to, Stonyfield yogurt. Like that's the best. All right, like that's what you need to do." I have a personal interest in that, right? I want Stonyfield yogurt to sell as much as they possibly can, so I'm going to mention that. Or, "Oh yeah, these shakes, they're great. This, I don't know, I can think of it right now. Um, these shakes are my favorite, and I think they're great. But I get, let's say, a, percent off of every shake sold at the local health food store if the person tells me that the person tells them that they that I sent them there, right? So that would again be another uh, conflict of interest, right? So I could have stock in Stonyfield yogurt and not recommend them, and it would be more okayish, right? Like I could say, "Oh, well, um, uh, Greek yogurt is a good source of protein, depending on the brand and depending on the size. Each container could have 12 to 20 grams. As far as brands, just whichever one you like, whichever one has a flavor you like, or is on sale at HEB that week, like that's fine. That's not a conflict of interest. Like I still have that stock, but I'm not using that to tell somebody what to do. Back when I did protein research, one of the other researchers used to say a skim milk latte and Greek yogurt was like the easy go-to um, high protein breakfast for people. Conflict of interest has also been defined in terms of a situation in which financial or other personal considerations have the potential to compromise or bias professional judgment or objectivity. There was a well-known scientist who was taking money from Coca-Cola, and people had questioned that. So um, people felt like that was biasing some of his decisions. So whether or not it was, I don't know. But we also have to do with this appearance as well. When we're providing information to people, we want to provide evidence-based, and this is a provision of healthcare that incorporates the most current and valid research results, empowers both the client and the exophysiologist to ask important questions and seek fundamental answers. So we want to use relevant research. How do we provide evidence-based information? We're going to develop a question, we're going to search for evidence, we're going to evaluate the evidence, and then we can incorporate it into practice. That's the last slide, guys. And so we're going to evaluate the client, develop a question, search for evidence such as peer-reviewed journal articles, not experimental studies, maybe. It have to be a journal article if you can find some good things. I consult expert opinions in textbooks. Evaluate the evidence, and we can incorporate the evidence into the person's plan. That's it for chapter 18. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let me know if you have questions.